As I was researching what ended up being chapter 2 in the book, I came across a very interesting quote by Panofsky, a well-known German art historian, who wrote the following in the mid-1930s. He said, "Film art is the only art, the development of which men now living have witnessed from the very beginning. And this development is all the more interesting as it took place under conditions contrary to precedent. It was not an artistic urge that gave rise to the discovery and gradual perfection of the new technique. It was a technical invention that gave rise to the discovery and gradual perfection of a new art." I think this is a very interesting quote in a number of ways, and well, one of them is the fact that I think audiovisual translation could replace film in this text in a very meaningful way. So we could easily say that audiovisual translation is the only form of translation, the development of which men now living have witnessed from the beginning, as opposed to other forms of translation that date back centuries, of course. But it's also important, this quote, I think, and considering audiovisual translation in the context of this quote, because there are clear connections between the use of audiovisual translation and the technological and artistic developments that have taken place in cinema, in the film industry, during most of the 20th century. So what I deal with in this chapter is basically the following. I examine how early forms of audiovisual translation proved instrumental for the technological and artistic development and perfection of film, because it definitely allowed for more creative experimentation. It allowed creators to develop more complex narratives, which made viewers enjoy films more, and therefore attracted more people to cinemas, and reinforced the status of film during decades as the only form of mass entertainment. And then, because obviously audiovisual translation contributed to the remarkable degree of social penetration that film was able to achieve in only a short period of time. So audiovisual translation is inextricably interlinked with the industrial and economic expansion of film, of the film industry. I've decided to call this chapter Audiovisual Translation as a Site of Representational Practice, so I'd like to take a couple of minutes to explain why I went for that title. The chapter covers the evolution of audiovisual translation during a period that begins early in the 20th century with the origins of cinema, and covers up to the early and mid-1990s. So therefore we include here the emergence and consolidation of TV as an additional form of entertainment, and therefore the consolidation of what we may now call the mass media era. During this period, the film industry, and specifically the Hollywood industry as the most powerful film industry, has carried out a very close monitoring of the way in which audiovisual translation was done. And here I refer to the opinion of a number of film scholars who draw our attention to the way in which the Hollywood industry was able to achieve that. And that was by imposing what they call the suture editing technique. Basically, the need to synchronize the visuals with the sound so that the narrative pattern of the film could be completely controlled as to how it unfolds, and therefore more easily translated. So that's something that a number of readers might want to know more about through this chapter. In order to do that, the film industry monopolized the technologies required to carry out audiovisual translation. So this was one more way in which they were able to do that close monitoring. They were able to control the way in which audiovisual translation developed, the way it was done. And in doing all this, they also, the industry players, managed to come up with a set of homogenizing mediation strategies. There are a set of conventions of audiovisual translation that have been imposed on professionals who they felt had to adhere to those conventions imposed by the industry. So basically what this chapter covers is the evolution of audiovisual translation at a time when the production and consumption of audiovisual content followed what we now call linear models of consumption and distribution, which basically meant that it was the industry through their control of the technology and so on that decided what we watched and when we watched it. So, we basically, as users, had to abide by those impositions. In the final section of the chapter, I look at the implications of this evolution of audiovisual translation and the control that the industry had during audiovisual translation during this period. And I do that by considering things like, for example, which was the preferred form of audiovisual translation in each of the main audiovisual markets, or why, for example, certain audiovisual genres became associated with specific forms of audiovisual translation to date.